Okay, I just want to show a little bit about doing models and EER diagrams. So an EER diagram is an enhanced entity relationship diagram. So the entities are going to be the tables of the database, and then the relationships between them have mainly to do with what's called referential integrity, which is enforcing that if a piece of data in one table depends on a piece of data in another table, that table that's being referenced, that's being depended upon, its data can't be destroyed or otherwise destructively altered, because that would mess up the other table, right? So that's basically it. So I'll show you what this stuff looks like and so on. So you might recognize I've got a script here. This is the orchestra's database from the final exam from last semester. I'm going to go in here and just run this thing. So it creates all of the tables over here, refresh, and there's orchestras. I drop it down. It's got the tables, Baroque orchestra, classical orchestra, and families. Now these guys, you recall, they already have a column that kind of references families over here. By the way, I think last semester I called it instrument families. I've renamed these just a little bit to make a little bit more sense to someone not familiar with the data. But anyway, I just named that families. But there was a family ID in each of the orchestras that's supposed to reference the families in the families table, which is talking, it's got stores like strings, woodwinds, brass, percussion, that sort of thing. So what I want to do, I'm going to go ahead and create a model of this database with its 3 tables, just so you can see what it looks like. Then we'll modify something about the tables to actually add that referential integrity in, and then we'll go and then we'll create a simple EER diagram from scratch. So EER diagram, there are plenty of tools you can do one right here in MySQL Workbench, and you do that by going back to the Home tab here, which we've kind of ignored the whole time unless we had to log back into the local instance. But on the Home icon, then there's these 3 guys over here. This is the local instance. The third one here is this migration bit. We don't need that for now. The middle one here, where it shows this little diagram of what an EER diagram might look like. If you reduce down to icons, click this, and we're in the models. And there's 3 things you can do here. You can create a brand new model. You can open a model, which I believe is a .mwb file format, if I'm remembering correctly. For now, I'm going to go for the third one here. Click this, which is to create an EER model from a database, or I could create it directly from the script that created the database. But let's go ahead and just do it. We've already got the database. Create EER model from database. Click on this. And then you have to go through a number of steps here. And every time you do this, okay, this can be kind of irritating because every time you do this, you have to log back in with your credentials. And it can get irritating because you can only be working on one model at a time. So while you're learning this stuff, you're going to be constantly opening, closing, creating new models, closing those, saving them, opening up new ones, and so on. Yeah, like every single time you do, you got to log back in and again. So it's just one of those things. Let's see if I can get this right. It seems like every time I type this, it gets a little harder. Okay, cool, I got it. So just keep clicking next and so on, and then at some point you get to the point where you can select what databases you want to include. So I'm going to grab I don't know why some of these are indented. Anyway, I'll grab orchestras. By the way, these are checkboxes, so you can get more than one if you want. But I'm just going to grab the orchestras and click on next, next, execute, next, and finish. There we go. And this is our EER diagram for that database. So I don't know how it chooses to lay these out in here. It's kind of messy sometimes. It's like doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but you just kind of drag these around until they kind of make sense. So I think families should be on top since Baroque orchestra and classical orchestra are both kind of referencing it. So I don't know, something like this would make a little more sense to me than having them all spread out like that. But okay, so let's take a look at this really quick. These are the tables of the database or the schema. It shows up over here in this catalog tree too, right? So here's orchestras, and it's got the little oil drum can for the schema, and then here's the tables, and Baroque orchestra, classical orchestra, and so on. It doesn't go any further than this. Like if you're in the local instance, of course, you can go further and take a look at the columns in these and so on and so forth. But you can't really do that here. It just has the tables and that's it. And then underneath here, there's the properties and description and so on. This is important. We'll get to that. These icons are for creating new elements in your schema. If you want to create new tables or new relationships or views or something like that, you can do that over here. Okay, so let's look at this really quick. I'm going to go to the catalog tree and right-click on Orchestra and go to Edit Schema. There's not much you can do here, but you can rename this. I want to mention right at the beginning, so I don't forget, that when you make any edits to the EER diagram here, you're not actually editing the original database, the one that's stored in my SQL Server over here. All you're doing is editing this graphic, and that's it. Now, yeah, unless you do like a reverse engineer or something, it's not going to affect the actual database. So just be sure that you understand that. I think it can be tempting at first to go in here and start making edits and think, oh yeah, I'm modifying my schema, and you're actually not. So other than changing the character set and so on, changing the name is pretty much the only thing you can do here. Now to edit a table, there's actually 3 different ways you can do it. One, you can go over here and do the same thing. I can right click and go to Edit Table, and that'll bring this guy up. Or, let's see, that was Baroque Orchestra. I'll go here. You can right click on this table in the diagram and go to Edit Baroque Orchestra. Takes you to the same place. Or you can just double click on it. That's probably the easiest thing. Now, here's where you can modify all this stuff about the table. And again, you're not actually modifying the database itself, like the actual one. I want to say the physical one. Of course, it's not physical, but the one that actually is storing your data, you're not modifying that. You're just modifying the graphic here. But this is the same interface that it will show. Let's see if I can actually get this to show up. Sometimes it doesn't. If I go to Baroque Orchestra here in the local instance and go to the little wrench icon and click on that, and yeah, it's not showing up here because interface, but you'll probably see it on yours. You're supposed to see here the same thing that we're seeing over here, where you can modify the column names and you can change all the metadata about them, whether or not it's a primary key or whether it's not nullable or whether it's auto-incrementing the data type, all that stuff you can modify right here. And you're supposed to be able to do it in the local instance too, but the interface is a little wonky sometimes. So anyway, so like what do all these guys mean? So PK, primary key, that is, you can only get, well, no, you can have that on more than one column, actually. NN is not nullable. So in this case, family's ID is not nullable. Notice if you look on the graphics up here, so these icons in here, this little gold key, of course, that means primary key. The little blue diamond means it's just an ordinary column with data. If it's a blue diamond that's filled in, that means it's not nullable. So that's this guy right here. UK, unique. You don't need to do that for anything that's auto-incrementing. It'll be unique by default. B, I think this is binary data. UN is unsigned. It's for integers or numbers that you don't want to allow negatives on. 0 filled also has to do with numbers. I think we'll get into that in data types. AI is auto-incrementing. G is a generated column. I don't think I've ever used one of those. So anyway, that's what all this stuff is. So let me go ahead and let's see. We'll take a really quick look here. If I can close that. If I click on one of these guys and go to properties down here, and this is where you can change stuff. And again, it only changes stuff like, it only changes how this is appearing, like what the color is. Expanded, true. By default, the indice is expanded as false, but you can just tap in there and just type a T for true and hit return, and it'll pull this down and show you what indexes there might be on this table. Right now, it's just a primary key. So indexes, we'll talk about more about those, but basically it's just a way for a system to look up a field using only one column instead of reading through the whole table. You can either open it here or you can just pop this open over here. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to close this diagram. Remember, you can only have one open at a time. And then I'm going to go into the local instance and modify the 2 orchestra tables to add a foreign key where that's referencing the families table. And then we're going to come back here again and see what it looks like. So let me close this guy and then close this guy. It's going to say, hey, you haven't saved yet. Don't save. It's all right. Let's see. Need that useless thing. Okay, so here I'm going to do an alter table. Let me use orchestras first. There we go. Zoom in a bit. So I'll run that. And then I'm going to do an alter table. I decided to go ahead and show this to you because it's something that we're going to be doing, I think, in the next chapter when you're creating databases and tables, I think. So this is DDL language, data definition. And yeah, let's go ahead and do an alter table. I'm going to add a constraint. And the constraint is going to be a foreign key. And this is wrong. I have to tell it what table I'm altering. Otherwise, it's going to get really confused. So actually, let me go ahead and just double click them here. So I'm altering the table's Baroque orchestra, adding a foreign key. I'm going to tell it which column I want to be a foreign key. And it is, if I open up columns, it's not ID, that's the primary key. It's this family's ID. That's the one that's actually referencing the families. So I'll call this one families ID. I have to tell it what table I'm referencing, references, and families, and what column in families ID. So I'm making a connection now, a referential connection between families ID in Baroque Orchestra and the ID column in families, and saying this guy depends on this guy over here. Once I do that, like I won't be able to delete one of the IDs in families if there's anything in families ID that's referencing it. I'll have to go in and do it one at a time. So let's see, I think that's going to go ahead and do it. Do Control Enter. I'm going to do exactly the same thing here. I won't type it all again because we'll do this again later, but I'll copy it, and instead of Baroque Orchestra, I'll do Classical Orchestra. There we go. I'm adding a constraint to that as well. Foreign key, families ID. There's one of those in Classical Orchestra as well. There it is. References the same ID column in families. So I'll go ahead and run that. Okay, so this is stuff that we'll see later on. But let's go ahead and right now I'm going to jump back in to the models. And once again, create EER model from database. Click through the next, log in again, right? Please let me get it right the first time. Yes, haha. And then next, once again, I'm going to choose orchestras, not OM, but orchestras. Click next, next, execute, next, and finish. And once again, it's trying to hide them from me. And this, okay, put them way down here, but at least I put them a little bit closer together. So now you can see these relationships, right? This is a one-to-many relationship. The many being this little, where it's kind of splatting out there, and the one being this guy over here. It can be 1 or 0 or many. Same thing down here. You get this splat that shows that, yeah, this is a one-to-many relationship. So each ID in here could be referenced by any number of entries over here. Like one ID reference is like strings, and I can have all kinds of different instruments in here that belong to the strings category. So that's the one-to-many relationship. Let's go ahead and create one really quickly. Oh, before we do, let's go back in here and let's just drop down the indexes. Now you can see there's two. There's the primary and the family's ID. Same thing over here, the primary and the family's ID. Let's go back in here and edit by double-clicking, and this time I will go to foreign keys again, and it's showing here that I've got the foreign key. I wanted to do this specifically to show you that the column here that houses the data that's referencing families is called families ID. That's the name of that column. And you can see the diamond turns red. That means it's a foreign key. It's filled. That means it's not nullable. Families ID is the name of the column. The name of the foreign key is something different. It's called Baroque Orchestra IBFK1. I want to make sure everybody understands that the foreign key is not the same thing as the column that holds the data. The column is just there to hold the data, right? The foreign key is a constraint that's been added to the table. It's like another piece of metadata. And the two can, and not almost always, but very often do have different names. And they're referenced in different ways. So just for now, just make sure you understand that. The column is not the same thing as the key itself, and they can, and usually do, I think, have different names. Okay, so enough said. I'm just going to Click and drag across all these guys, and right click, and let's just delete these. So how to do this from scratch? I'll keep this one really short. I'm just going to place a new table. It's this icon right here. And I can click in here and then double click to edit to start changing information. So I'm going to go ahead and create a cards table. This is kind of inspired by the project that Daniel did last year. And then down here I can add columns. Double click down here and see, I'll give it an ID. When I tab, it assumes that the first column I did is the primary key, so it gives it that. It checks primary key, not nullable. Data type is int. I'm going to give it an auto increment as well, which it does not do by default. You've got to add that in. And then let's just say, I won't do the whole thing, but let's just say each card has a name, and that's just going to be varchar 45. And that also is not nullable. We need to have a name, and then let's just do has foil. Do I want to do that? No, it doesn't matter. I just want to show like grabbing a different data type here. So if you click on varchar 45 and you get the drop-down menu and it has all of these on there, you may have a configuration on yours where it only shows a few of them by default, but you can only start typing one of them in and it'll get the full list and give that to you. And I'm going to use tinyInt, which is basically like a Boolean called tinyInt1, and that also is not nullable. Now you have to be careful because if you tab out of there, it sometimes creates a new column that you didn't intend. So anyway, I've got these guys, and let's go ahead and just read that. And then here is the cards table. I'm going to make a new table very quickly, and let's see. There we go. I keep trying to drag it out and it doesn't work. And let's say it's my collection. And I'm going to have an ID. And same thing, primary key, not null. I'm going to auto increment it. And this collection, the only thing it's going to do for right now is just reference cards, right? So I'm going to have any number of cards in here. It's going to be a one-to-many relationship. And see, it might actually make sense as a one-to-one relationship. But let's go ahead and do this. I'm just showing you how to create the relationship itself. For that, you use these icons down here. Here's the one-to-one. One-to-n means one-to-many. So the dashed line means it's non-identifying. Identifying is the solid lines. That means that the primary key in one table references directly to the primary key in another table. I'm not sure if I've ever used one of those before. I'm just going to grab the non-identifying one-to-many. Click on the referencing table first, the one that you want the foreign key in, and then click on the referenced table here, and it creates that one-to-many relationship that we saw before. Yeah, I'll go ahead and stop there. We will do more. We'll do the chapter 10 when we're in class, and we'll record that one as well. All right, see you guys in class.